Good evening, everybody. Tonight is June 5th. It is the monthly meeting for the school building committee. First item on the agenda will be from Vertex. If you wanted to run forward with that option.
What was the first item on the agenda? I'm just pulling that up.
Review the outcome of the school committee discussion.
Yeah, all right. Well, that was the part I was going to kick to Denise.
Perfect.
That's fine.
Yeah. So over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, as a byproduct of the override vote, and our inability to get it passed, the school committee's been having discussions around the go forward potential for a project at the middle high school and what options that we might have potentially to do something of lesser scope, understanding that there's a high concern around cost and increase in taxes in the town. So coming off of sort of a failed tri-county vote, a failed senior center vote, a failed operational override vote, and the need for the school to retain staff, well, hopefully at some point return staff that were lost from the operational override not going through. We started having conversations around, can we still support a project at the scope of which we were talking in the last 3, 4, 5 months. And as a result, we had some conversations with the working group to kind of share our concerns. And we asked Jeff to talk to the MSBA to see if there might be some appetite for them to partner with the town on a project of lesser scope. And the initial feedback from that conversation is it's possible, but they need to understand what lesser scope means. So we've talked as a committee. We've come back and wanted to talk to this group because we want to go forward and continue with the process, but ask Vertex, mostly TAPE, I think, to look at some much smaller options of projects that we can move forward with, still address the critical needs of the building, but that would be of lesser cost. We have no idea about what those costs look like. We had some options that we were thinking about. The TAPE, Chris and his team were already going down the path of putting together a 10-year capital plan to see, as major systems could get done, how much they had to be spaced out, what the cost would be for individual pieces and parts doing it, and then doing it over what time frame so that we didn't trip code. So we asked for a couple of other options to be considered. So if we think of that initial one that the TAPE team was already going down the path of as option 0, which would be sort of the fully funded by Millis because the MSBA wouldn't participate in any sort of project that spans that time frame and takes that approach. We wanted to get a sense of what costing might look like if we were to do just the systems needs, but as part of a project. So not extended over a lengthy time period like the 10 years, but to actually put it into kind of a condensed project like what we're doing right now, but again, much smaller. Scope would only include doing systems. So there's some educational benefit. We were just talking at the beginning of the meeting about sort of the heat in the building. There are things that the systems are causing that absolutely get in the way of education. So the thought is to have some discussions about alternative options and then go back to the MSBA to see if they would be willing to participate in projects of smaller scope. So again, option 0, fully funded by Millis, 10-year plan. TAPE was already in the process of going through a review and providing that back to the committee. Option 1 is, again, systems only, and open question as to whether the MSBA would participate or not. Option 2 would be systems upgrades, and then science room upgrades. So we know we have some space issues in the science rooms. They haven't been upgraded in decades, and it's really the area that's the most lacking. So what I should have mentioned at the outset is the Vertex had asked Bob and the administrative team, and along with John Engler, to look at what are the most critical needs within the building and the ed plan, and could we take those and rank them, if you will, and sort of ruthlessly prioritize what really needs to get done and see if we could formulate some different options. So that's sort of how we got to what the options look like. So that's why science is sort of a recurring theme. So we have so far option 0, option 1, option 2, and then they sort of just build upon each other. So with each option, we're adding a piece. So we get to option 3, which is do what we're calling the bare bones of all the systems, and then the science rooms again, get an upgrade. Sorry, I forgot about bleachers. They're a safety issue in the gym. So bleachers go into options bare bones plus science upgrade and bleachers, bare bones plus science upgrade, bleachers, and a small addition that would either be a couple of classrooms because we need them, or a multi-use space rather for science, STEM, makerspace. So we had some conversations last week with the working group. We proposed those options. We had some conversation with Chris and asked him, to start thinking about what that might look like from his perspective to kind of cost out what those things would be. And then the first step, as far as next steps go, would be we really need to figure out from a spacing perspective and within the building where we're overcrowded in different rooms. So if we're not going to make classrooms bigger, that's going to potentially, well, it won't potentially, that'll raise an issue with the MSBA that could prohibit us from getting them to partner financially on doing work to the building. So Chris is in the process of doing a review of all the classrooms. The dimension requirements are different if you're doing like a full renovation as opposed to, if I'm saying anything wrong, Mike and Jeff, please jump in. So what we saw before with all of those red rooms, if you remember, like the red outlines of rooms of things that like didn't meet their requirements, it differs a little bit if we change the scope of the project. So wanted to bring everybody up to speed on the discussions that the school committee has had, the reasons that we started to have them, and sort of where we've landed, which is we have concerns about going forward with a project of the size of which we've been talking about, 130 million plus. So I have asked design team to take a look at some project options of greatly reduced scope, of which I just sort of talked about at a high level. So that's kind of the update from the school committee. School committee met. We discussed it in an open meeting last week on camera. So what I just gave you is sort of a summary of those discussions with a little bit more that we learned Wednesday when we talked as a working group.
Denise, can I add a couple of things?
Absolutely.
So part of it is, why are we, and I brought this up in the working group the first time when we started talking about it, the kind of option 0 and 1 and 2 specifically that we're asking for. I can expect some people to say, well, why didn't you guys start there? Why didn't you, why didn't you try and just build that from the beginning? And Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're really asking the MSBA right now to change the parameters of what they would have allowed us to do because we've had multiple overrides not supported when you account Tri-County, and obviously that was not Millis specific in terms of where the funding was going to go. But with that and with the override, there are things. So 2 months ago, if we had gone to the MSBA and asked them to do this, the answer would have been no, because it really wasn't in the scope of the type of program and project we're in. The other thing that the school committee has been pretty adamant about and reiterated is our priority is restoring staff. So, you know, it's very cognizant that we are very much going to advocate for an operational override to restore positions. And that is more imperative than any of the projects. Like, so we need to move forward on that, which then begs some timing things of how these things flow together or don't. And another thing, because Jeff, you had mentioned it when we talked last week. If we don't if we don't go for the override, and if it fails, again, as we're going through these classroom sizes and what that means, the project and all of the ratios that this project and all the approvals are based on is based on the staffing levels of fiscal 23. If we're unable to restore the positions, there is a risk, and it may only be isolated, but there's a risk that some of the ratios that we had are going to trip concerns. So, you know, there was one concept somebody asked if, you know, do you do the building first and then worry about positions later? And the school committee is collectively, unanimously not in support of doing that, but also restoring the positions actually could impact our ability to move forward with ratios in the staffing and what's allowed and what isn't, even in this amended request that we're doing.
I'm gonna add one more thing that I forgot, if that's okay.
After you,
and
I
then,
will
then I'll
jump
stop
in.
talking. And the last thing that I would add is we want to try to obviously we want to be respectful of the concerns of the community, and at the same time take advantage of a financial opportunity that we have potentially with the state. So we were well invited into the program. The program has financial benefits, and what we're trying to do is strike the right balance of how do we get what we need done with the building, get funding from the state, and maximize both. So I hate to say it this way, but spend the least and get the most out of what we're spending. And we don't know what that threshold is of how little we can do where the MSBA will participate. So and we don't know if any of the options that we have initially proposed would result in MSBA participating, but we wanted to take a look at them to see if, if spending $2 million more, I'm making up numbers, some number more gets us maybe a little bit more reimbursement or the space that we actually need within the building. So while we're not doing the full renovation, the whole building, build a new wing, whatnot, we're still trying to be fiscally responsible, and also address some of the issues, obviously, with the building itself and the ed plan. So, excuse me. So we do want to try to find a way to make it work with the state, because obviously we would like the participation of the financial piece. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Red.
So my only concern is, and I talked to Jeff about this earlier, is the timeline of how long the state's going to wait for us. I mean, all this sounds great, but the meeting for the to get the staff on board would be, were we going to try for fall of this year or spring of next year? That'd be you guys.
That's that decision by the select.
Fall of this year. Yeah, it won't be this fall. Well,
November.
It's November, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't think there's a chance for that.
So that just pushes it off. All I'm saying is that there's, there's a timeline for the MSBA.
Well, I
And
mean, I can't say for certain that it won't be November, but I think it's highly unlikely that it'll be November.
So
Um,
the consideration to do it as part of the presidential election is off the table.
I mean, well, we can have further discussion on it. November to me seems awfully soon for this building override. But maybe I'm
No, not the bill.
Oh,
Right.
not the, sorry,
Stop
go
it.
ahead, Rick, yeah.
sorry. Yes, I think the building override is off the table for November. I would really like to bring the restorative for the school and however it's structured, the other positions we talked about adding to the municipal side back in November. I think that doing as part of the presidential is our best shot of getting the information.
so that means that if anything happened, it would be spring of next year. So Jeff, the question to you is, is the MSBA going to sit around and wait for us that long to develop something?
So
No,
a
So the
a lot of,
sorry.
if I
So the
can,
if the operational override goes in November and it passes, so let's just map this through. Right now, the building project, whatever that would be, is slated to go for May of 2025. The request we have, and Jeff can talk to timing of moving it out, it probably can't move more than a few months realistically beyond May. So it really does, having the operational override in November really make doing this project within an MSBA acceptable time frame much more likely. If we can't get an operational override on the ballot till May, then we have problems with the timing of the project.
And I'll just add, and we also have problems with the educational offerings that we have for the district. So we would
Yes.
like to do that as quickly as possible so that we can get moving on restoring the positions that were lost.
No, and this is all good. It's just like I said, we just want to make sure that what we're even talking about is doable. So,
Sure, absolutely.
The process for November would be town meeting votes, election vote, the whole exact repeat of what it is. Their town meeting vote doesn't count anymore, so we have to start over again. So just to be clear on that.
all right, so I know a lot of questions have been asked by me, and so I want to take them in a few different orders. A lot of good information was put out there tonight to the broader group here. The school department is obviously looking to understand restoring those positions and, reducing the overall scope of the project. For the reasons Denise talked about, the past few votes in town have rejected kind of larger scale projects. So I think what the school committee is asking us, regardless of the override, is let's get back to the minimal amount of addition renovations we can do to the existing building that breathes new life into it, right? And so that part in itself will take its own path regardless of the override. So we know we're not marching forward to a new construction option. That was never something you guys really wanted to do, but you were looking at a few months ago a full, gut renovation of a lot of spaces in the building. This is a much more dialed back addition renovation, or maybe just renovation with options 1 or 2. I've had some initial conversations with the MSBA, and certainly, their opinion is, they picked you guys to go forward into invitation to feasibility. There were many other towns that also applied. They recognize the need that you guys have to fix elements of your existing building. So they're going to work with you in the initial parts of this to make sure that you guys can come to terms with something that they can support long term. You heard Denise and Mark kind of hit on a couple of things. The MSBA's, minimal standards are safety, right? And so if you're building new, they want you to build to a certain threshold. If you're renovating, they're not going to make you tear down interior walls of a building just to meet a certain specific size of a general ed classroom, a science room, a sped room. What they will ask you to do is to make sure that the class size policies is safely in alignment with the size of the classrooms that you have, so that you're not putting 30 kids in a 700 square foot classroom. Like that doesn't meet the spatial requirements that you need for a classroom. And so, Mark alluded to the fact that there were a couple of positions eliminated, which may make class sizes go up to that 30 range, versus the more comfortable, 20 to 22 to 24 range, which is more typical of your contemporary towns that are around you. So if the positions exist that allow you to make sure you're below that 25 student threshold, likely you can work with the MSBA to find a path forward that works with the existing sizes of the buildings. There may be a space or two that require more. And so that's where Denise alluded in option 3, you may end up with a small addition because science rooms take up the most space. And so you may decide that, chemistry or physics, things that have chemicals in them, maybe need larger spaces. And so you may end up with a couple of classroom additions. Those are all decisions that TAPE will explore with you. And we'll explore all those options that the school committee has asked us to do. The first was to pause the project team. And so we've been paused for the month of June, working on, time materials, responding to individual questions that the school committee or the working group have asked us to do. Mainly that's to put TAPE and their consultants looking at this 10-year capital plan. So it's kind of going back and taking a deeper dive of all the existing conditions analyses that were done this spring, which really looked at a 50-year building. Now you're looking at what can't survive 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. So it's just a different metric as how you go about that. And so that's the work TAPE is currently pursuing. And with the feedback that Denise brought to us last week, we talked about those other 3 options and looking at what those might be. And I just I've typed them here to put them on the screen. It might be a little easier to articulate what we've been talking about. And I'm going to answer a couple of Rich's questions. So if you guys can see my second screen now, can you see the Word doc? Am I showing the right screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So, option 0, we're calling it, is the 10-year capital plan. We're really going to confirm the near-term needs of the building, right? Because if this project goes away, this town still has to address with those items. Baked into that is the thresholds that you'll trigger, because once you trigger renovating more than 30% of the building, you start to trigger ADA thresholds and other upgrades to the project. So one thing TAPE is doing is looking at what needs to happen in 10 years and understanding what those code triggers are, because if you shut this project down, the town still has to deal with those elements. So that's kind of option 0 that we're defining. And then Denise laid out these other 3 options, one being only a systems upgrade. That's both a mechanical, electrical MEP system, and then building envelope, which would include mechanical, electrical, plumbing, security systems, roof, window, but no program changes. We asked the school department to go back and look at the absolute crucial needs of the building. And those are the elements that they came back with. Option 2 builds on option 1, except it replaces a few more items that are past their useful life, such as the gym bleachers, and then some level of upgrades to the science rooms to be determined after we see the report from TAPE. And then level 3, again, builds on the first 2 options, but adds that small addition that may have a science room, may have STEM, or may have some other multi-purpose room that can't be delivered in the existing bricks and mortar that you have. And so those are the level of options that we're doing. And what the MSBA said is go back to your committee, like we're doing tonight, and talk about it and give direction back to the consultants. And I will chat with the MSBA about our next steps moving forward. But they're absolutely happy to work with a renovation only option. You don't have to do an addition renovation. You don't have to do new construction, but you will have to make sure that you're meeting those code triggers and that you're delivering a safe space with the ratio of students. So, option 1 and 2 can work provided they meet those, but we have to look at what the code triggers are and how far those renovations go. They may still be pricey options in the grand scheme of things over option 0, which is really just to the absolute bare bones. So I kind of wanted to, put that on the screen to kind of give you guys some context.
And from my point of view, knowing what option 0 costs, I mean, that's where you're starting. So if option 0 is $30 million, just to throw a number out, it's not that the new building, with the state participation is $80 million. We're not going from 0 to 80 million. We're going from 30 million to 80 million as our differential. I mean, not that I'm advocating for it or not, but understanding that doing nothing isn't free because we have to upgrade and keep the building going. I think that point has to be made. So I'm really curious. I mean, my decision on what I would like to see happen is going to be very dependent on the price and the state participation. Because I'm very willing to spend a few extra $1 million to get a far better option if the state's kicking in, you know, 40, $50 million or you know, $30 million, $40 million. I'm very happy to spend their money to get a $40 million better product than just do the baseline renovations. I hope we all are, because that's penny wise pound foolish on it. But until we get those numbers, it's a hard conversation to have. It's all theoretical.
Right, and on that, Craig, part of the tricky part is the threshold with the code upgrade. That's the whole new ball of wax that's thrown into this thing, which makes it even more infinitely complicated.
I mean, we're not gonna walk away from the school and say this is what you got for the next 10 years. Because if
Right.
nothing else, we have to fix the mechanicals, the electrical, the plumbing, and the roof, and whatever else is going to fail over the next 10 years. And our estimate from Capital Planning Committee was $10 or $12 million for that, but that estimate was 10 or 12 years old, I think. You know, so I'm sure those prices have probably, you know,
Which even in that south, you know, you're essentially triggering all the upgrades. I mean, the current valuation of the building is around $30 million. And so, you know, once you spend that 15 million over, it links it over 3 years. So even if you tried to space it, just do 3, stretch it another 3 years, do another, you know, 5 million, stretch it another 3 years, do another 5 million. You really have protracted, you know, investment in the building really to try and dodge those code triggers.
yeah,
But,
and I
you
think
know,
that's all the part that we need to see. I like Denise's list that the school committee produced. I think that's a good model to work off of. And then it's going to just be a question of the incremental cost between each of the levels. I mean, there's a large segment of this population that would watch the school fall down. I mean, honestly, I think that there are people that have no vested interest in the community that now live in our community. But that's not an option. We're going to have to find some way to fund it. If, at some level, on a maintenance level at least, you know. I don't think there's a large minority. I don't think there's a majority of the town that believes that. But I think there's a large group that believes that. Or believes we're just going to make the wrong choices because they are the experts. This committee, you know, this is kind of a hobby for us, and they Googled it, and schools don't cost this much. Yeah.
that in a lot of towns, Craig, for sure.
Yeah.
Naysayers in every town.
Yeah.
But, you know, you know, Rich and everybody here has asked me a lot of questions that, you know, we cannot answer right now, which is what's the state's participation going to be in terms of dollars, right? Because until we price up the option, kind of run it through the calculator, you know, it's hard to know exactly what that's going to be. When it's a new construction option, the math is all straight. What we're doing is something different, right? It's not $1 per square foot because you may only touch portions of the building. Right. So I'm not clear yet on how the MSBA would view the participation there. There's still your base rate, and then there's your maintenance renovation bonus points. You're going to get those. You probably would not go the sustainability road of trying to get that extra 4% because that's a net zero building and geothermal and things like that they're not even on the table here. But there's still a lot of dollars that are available. But until the options are developed, then priced, then reviewed with the MSBA, it really is hard to put your finger on what that option is. And so I think it makes sense that, you know, we leave with direction tonight at some level of what you want the consultants to do so they could do that work, bring it back to you, have you see the numbers, make the recommendations, and then go back to the MSBA. That in and of itself will push out the overall timeline because we're going more granular now. It's more gritty with this approach. And so, you know, we're likely to not hit town meeting because in order to hit the annual town meeting in May in your town, you know, really need to know what we're doing or have certainty with what the MSBA will say. And right now we don't have those answers. So I think it would behoove us to kind of go a little slower, do the right math, come up with the right option. And then likely we would submit that in the fall to the MSBA, get their feedback direction. By the end of the year, you would know what the deal is that you then want to either move forward at that point or freeze the project, right? Because after you submit the next phase with the MSBA, the PSR phase, you'd have a lot more understanding of what they're willing to participate in. And you could still at that point, at the end of this calendar year, say, we don't like the way it all shook out, or this doesn't go far enough, but we can't afford more, and maybe we want to go with option 0. Or you end up with 1, 2, or 3, depending on how that all kind of plays out. So
What do you need from us, Jeff, on this? Do we need to vote on this to ask you guys to go ahead and proceed looking at these?
yeah, I think I would like direction tonight. You know, vote would be desirable, but not required, in the sense that I think what the MSBA wants from us on your behalf is to get back in touch with them with what you want us to proceed with. And so whether it's that 4 options that we showed on the screen a moment ago, or some other version thereof, my next task will be to, you know, release the designers to do that work, and then to go back to the MSBA and say, here's the updated timeline. Here's the path forward that they're analyzing. Is this still something you'd participate with? And based on the options 1, 2, or 3, the MSBA is still willing to work with you at this point until they see how those all play out. So I think we would be on a track. We will have to do some level of a resubmission this summer. And what that is that the previous report we submitted said we're looking at this list of options and this price range with this ed plan. Right now, we're going to go back to them and say, we're actually on a different timeline with reduced options and modifications to the ed plan, but we're still moving forward. And so we've left that as an open door as to what they're going to ask us to resubmit until I talk to you. But there will be some level of paperwork that Vertex and TAPE will have to assemble this summer and submit back. So I think a vote on those 0 to 3 options would be prudent. And that allows us to go back on your behalf to the MSBA, and then come back at your next meeting in kind of late July timeframe and say, here's the next steps with the supplemental, you know, report or letter report we have to submit.
I just want to say one thing. I don't know if this is relevant or not, but why not? Don't you think that a lot of whatever you're considering to happen next year for spring, is really going to get direction from what's going to happen this fall with the override again? Because there's a lot of people out there that think if this override doesn't pass in the fall, and these teachers are gone for what looks like maybe permanently, people are going to question redoing science rooms. And you know, there's a lot of talk out there that this override is going to affect this building. And I don't know if it's just perception or what, but I think that if the override passes in the fall, the enthusiasm for this building is going to increase. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but you make a decision now, and then the override passes. I think you may, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what people think.
Are you thinking, Ellen, that so if the override passes, you thinking like the project of the scope that we've been talking about already, that there's more support for that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Mark and I have had that conversation.
If you get back on a little bit more, if you get the talk out there and yes, we're idiots. We follow the last thing.
Yeah.
Now it's the next thing.
Right.
And I think that we'd still be on a time frame, though, by gathering this information, that by November we can finalize whatever the plan is. Either the town has to vote to spend $10 million every 3 years on the project or something. Whatever the math is to stay with under those thresholds, or we decide that we have to do more, or we can do more. And maybe it's option, I didn't write down the options, Denise, I'm sorry. Maybe 1, 2, or 3 at that point. I think what I'm hearing more and more is, though, that the large, and I'd like to see the options, obviously, because but the large renovation addition project we talked about may be less likely than it was before. I think it's more likely that it's going to be an option 3, I think, would address a lot of our needs. But if I found option 3 cost me, $5 million less than everything, it's a hard conversation to have, but
yeah.
So I think that's
go ahead,
so
Mark.
is it,
Yep.
so I think maybe the scenario is, because I do think, again, looking at option, 0, 1, 2, and 3, there's open question as to whether or not the MSBA will participate in those and to what extent. So, but I do think we should explore those so we understand. But does become an element, especially if the override does pass in November, that being able to compare, let's just go to option 3, the current option 3. Like, what is the difference between option 3 and say the current kind of option 4A that was out there that had the new gym? And Craig, to your point, if the difference between this kind of scaled back option 3 and what we truly believe is the correct 50-year option is, again, all in relative terms, but, you know, within reason of each other, to say we're doing a 50-year building or we're doing basically a patch job with a little bit extra that may suffice 10 to 15 years. Yeah, I think maybe we are looking at like, okay, let's do what we think is the right thing for the town and the district, and not just try and
I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not interested in saving what would be short money over a 30-year loan. But you're telling me there's a $40 million difference between 3 and 4A.
Right.
That's real money. If you're telling me there's a $5 or $8 million difference, that's a tough conversation. Yeah.
Right. So I guess my point is, and this is the conversation Denise and I had, which is like, I don't know that we should necessarily throw the old option off the table completely. If for no other reason, for that exact comparison, to be able to, and not be in a position to say, oh, well, I wonder, you know, because then if we can at least say, all right, well, the option, you know, it's a $40 million difference, or is it a $5 or $10 million difference?
Right. And I was never advocating throwing it off the table, but I think that we look at what we've got, and I think that that's an important number to have, because that comparison is going to be what tells the story and decides which direction we need, informs the direction we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of logic to that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the MSBA program itself always makes every town look at the pure renovation, always carry a new construction, and always carry an ad reno, because it gives that balance for the what ifs. And I think even with the options that are on the table today that we're discussing, you know, the committee really kind of crystallized around option 4A, you know, or in the PDP stage, as the most highly liked option amongst all of you. So you can still keep that on the list, right? And then, you know, the MSBA may still have us price out a new construction option, again, just because people in town want to know that. And if for nothing else, it shows that we've looked at many layers of this. You know, no stone has been unturned. You've looked at the all new, you've looked at a full ad reno that gets you what you want, and you've done the peel back options too. And you can get to a decision at that point. And, you know, after the town vote in the fall or whenever, you know, make the ultimate decision that you guys want, you know. Right. So it may make sense to keep in the running that and let the other ones fall off.
Well, if anything, it's leverage, right?
Yeah. I think having 5 options on the table that are this difference, and a 6th if you consider new construction, if we're mandated to look at that, I don't think anybody can say that we rush to judgment on what we're doing. Although I'm confident they will, because there's people that are going to tune in a week before the election. And
well, of course,
you think about doing this. If we only did this, we'd where's the swimming pool I thought we'd have? Yeah.
Track on the roof. Track on the roof.
So that's fine. So it sounds like I mean, that all made 100% sense. So why don't we do just what they described? Is we'll keep 4A, the other previous 4 options and on the table, and you guys get us some numbers on that, and let's see where things end up.
Rich, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Mark had said if the override didn't pass, and I'm not sure I understand what that means, we're going to have to do something about the building. And I, as a taxpayer, would just as soon do it with some of MSBA helping partner. So I guess I'm asking, what
And
do
this would be,
you,
if I
Yes.
understood Jeff correctly, we still will be within the MSBA. That's the goal, is they'll look at the options. And they'll know the participation that we'll be able to get from each option. And then we'd be able to pick and choose, what we wanted to do. And I agree with 100%, and Craig's the same way. If we can get free money, we should get free money.
I guess my take on it is if the override goes down by 1,000 votes, I'm looking at options 0, 1, or 2, much more likely than options
Yeah.
3 or 4.
Right.
That's the level,
Okay.
no matter how much free money I get, if it's going to cost me 20 million more to get 40 million free, that makes perfect sense to me as a person, but other people will want us to look at the cheapest option. And when you tell them it's going to cost you 10 million bucks to keep or 25 million bucks or whatever, 20 million bucks to keep the same damn school with a new roof, new electrical, and new plumbing, that's going to be an eye opener. Because I think I might be even low on that number based on the 19 we were carrying before, or the money we were carrying before the Tetra Tech project. Yeah. So I think that's going to be the eye opener. But I still think you have to propose something for the school that meets the minimum needs and has the best chance of passing, and is the best value,
Yeah.
because we
Right.
can't afford not to have anything. So that's a whole conversation after the other override goes. For the positions, the restorative positions, I think you have to put back in what you need. You're not trying to go for you're trying to maintain what you have. You're not trying to go for something really phenomenal. It's a different view on it. If we can keep the school running with quality staff at a sustainable level, that might be the best we can hope for. But let's see what else we get. But I'm absolutely with you. If I can get the state to participate in this thing, and it's going to cost me slightly more money, I guess school's going to last dramatically longer, that's absolutely where I'm going to be wanting to be. But that override will inform where the rest of the town wants to be.
That's pretty, and Craig, to what you just said, that's pretty universal amongst people. When you say that we're gonna do something for this and we're gonna get this much, that's a universal feeling. Everybody likes free money. So, right? I mean, I know they don't universally agree with you on most things, but they will agree with you on that.
Well, it's interesting because we do have a very strong track record of passing capital projects that have free money. The library, the Clyde Brown School. So free money does resonate with this community as it should for everybody.
It's actually our money, isn't it? People have said that in the past, right? It's our
did.
money, so.
We have paid this money into the state. I
Exactly.
would like
Yep,
to get
through
my money
taxes.
back.
Yeah.
That's even a better way
Right.
to put it.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. I don't want my money going to another community before us in this situation.
Since
All
enough
right,
of it already does.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, somebody was saying something?
No, it's okay.
Are you all set, Mark? Sorry.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we pass forward the 5 options for Tepe and Compass to proceed with getting more information on for a future town meeting vote.
Do you,
Get a second on that?
do you want to talk about timeline first, Rich, or just take the vote?
Well, why don't if I just say we're gonna go ahead and do it, we could timeline, we could do whatever. We don't, do you want to set a timeline with it, Mark, Jeff, or?
No. The timeline shouldn't be part of the vote. I just meant, do you
Yeah.
want to go over the timeline before you
Let's just
vote?
get the vote out of the way first. So can I
I'll
get a second?
second,
I'll
I'll
second.
second it.
All right, so I say aye. Diane,
Aye,
Denise,
Aye.
let's see here, Mark,
John.
sorry,
Aye.
and Craig,
Yes.
and sure, Ellen, you're here anyhow. We'll get your vote.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
did you get John Larkin?
Oh, Jesus, John, sorry about that. You were hiding in the corner. Yes, John.
Yes,
Okay,
All
All
right,
right.
so what was that motion, just so I remembered it back? It was going forward the option 0, the 3 options Denise recommended, and then the
For
Renault 4A.
yeah,
I do have a quick question, Rich, for Jeff. Really just a point of information for me, I guess. do you have any feeling, Jeff, any feedback from the state? You know, the whole idea of us going back to the state with a scaled down version of some sort. Are we unique in this situation? Are other communities having this kind of problem? Is the state going to be more receptive than they might have been in the past?
All good questions, John. I'll say you're in the minority. Right? Like most districts, as you had higher hopes for the process, right? That you're going for the full 50-year buildup of a
Yeah.
project. But there are, some entities that go with the pure renovation or addition renovation. Medway, when Compass's second project was Medway Middle School, we did about 15 years ago with the MSBA. That was a renovation project with a very small addition where they had merged their old middle high school into one building. And it went through with mostly a phased renovation with small bits of addition on it. When I talked to them more recently on this conversation, I said, is anybody else doing a pure renovation? And they said, yes, there was 2 towns that had just done a pure renovation. One was, I think, Byfield up over at, near the New Hampshire border there.
Yeah.
Where, they gave the story, which I bring back to you tonight, which is that town, not unlike yourself, had challenges financially with what they could get the public to support. So they went in from day one saying, this is the max that we can spend, and let's tailor our scope to that number. Now, this was, I think 7-8 years ago. So, I think $39 million stretched a little further than it does today. But
Yeah.
In any event, they went in with that number, and then the committee stayed disciplined. Right? And you held the line, and I think you guys should hold the line as to what you think the community can support. Now, that line can shift if we hear overwhelming support for other aspects, such as a fall town initiative or community forum support that really show a lot of enthusiasm. That helps this group here decide what's the right option to pick when you get to that point. But to answer your question is, John, they will support you. They recognize the need. They don't drive to new construction. They actually like the idea of seeing more ed renos because, they see majority of them go new construction because once you add in the swing space costs or downtime or rental of modulars, the costs end up being more equal. But you can certainly, if determined to make it that way, do a pure renovation or an addition renovation and then live through a little of those hardships. And so those are all conversations that this committee will have, based on the final scope that you guys develop as a group.
Okay, great.
So Byfield was one town. Who was the other?
I can get the names. They weren't pulling them off the top of their head. They didn't have them on the conversation that I had. They said there was a few, but that was the one that came to mind. But
Okay.
we can look into that. So as far as the timeline, and we can augment that tonight. Certainly, if the town decides you want to go back for a ballot initiative, that may make sense in adjusting it this fall before you come to a conclusion. But absence of that conversation, I asked TAPE and my team to put together some timelines, and those are included in your packet. Now, I'll kind of share that, and Chris or Mike, feel free to describe these as opposed to myself describing your work. So first off,
are you gonna share a screen, Jeff? Sorry.
I got it now, Mike. But TAPE's work plan here. So this envisioned the path that was discussed at the beginning of the night. So the feedback that Denise had requested of us, where one thing we have to do is respond to the PDP comments. Normally we would have submitted that by now, but because of this change in direction, we've paused on that. So at some point in July, we've got to submit a response to those PDP comments. At the same time, and I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk to your schedule or not, but we're going to go through an existing conditions reanalysis, right? What do we save? What can be saved? What lasts more than 10 years? Kind of taking the month of July to look at that, and then come back with some kind of breakdown of options in August, mapping out what that looks like, and then ultimately putting some costs together in September so you guys understand what that looks like. And then compiling a report at the end of October. Now, that's the part you may choose to shift based on the other political aspects that are going on with the townwide initiative for a ballot, or you may choose to stay on this path. But initially, the MSBA has filing deadlines, so this kind of works with that MSBA's filing deadline of October. so the MSBA can do their analysis and do it, give you a direction at their December board vote. So Mike has kind of outlined that here. Mike, you want to walk through your schedule here?
Yeah, basically, I took what Chris had done, thinking it through, and just looking at the whole project, including how we've gotten to where we are today, plugged in some of his durations there roughly. But what this does is this allows you to really put the brakes on and do some in-depth analysis. You know, the real question becomes, you know, is this something the MSBA will participate in? So what we first need to do is really get an idea of what those options are and present that back to the MSBA prior to getting too deep in the PSR schedule, you know, and have, we don't want to end up with wasted effort. So I think your money is best spent getting to a point where we can have a conversation with the MSBA, say, this is what the town thinks that they can proceed with. And, you know, is this something that the MSBA will participate in?
And when will that time be, Mike? Just so that would be around the town meeting time?
So one option would be to submit in October, right? If you wanted to hit the board vote in December. But not knowing ultimately the decisions you make in September, we may do more offline feedback with the MSBA before you make a final vote.
And I assume in the working group, we'd be going, taking a look at that to, you know, say option, you know, the first option and the second option basically end up running at the same cost level. We may do some adjustment on that also, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, Mike and Chris are showing you that cost estimating info comes back in September. So in October, you can, you know, change, add, remove, and that's where you may choose to take more time, right? I think, you know, everybody understands we want to get it right. And so we may choose not to hit that end of October filing deadline and let that drift out through the end of the calendar year when you come to a final conclusion. One of the things to keep in note is Mike showed the full schedule here, but with that schematic design in the spring, winter and the spring timeframe, you're not going to have an MSBA board vote by the time you get to annual. So it really doesn't matter when you wrap that up in May, June, or July with that final schematic design, because you would get a board vote either in August or October from the MSBA, depending on when you file, which would line you up for a fall 2025 town meeting for that full project, whatever the full project is. So what I'm saying there is you have time in this blue bar here to not be handcuffed by the October filing date and still not impact hitting a fall of 25 funding vote.
But I think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but I think one of the things Rich is asking is, you know, do we have the conversation with the MSBA before we get to sort of, you know, October here, right? In October of 24. And I'm wondering, Jeff, you have more experience with them than I do, is do we spend a couple of months, say July and August, pulling together the existing conditions and the options, and even before cost estimating is done, do we present that to the MSBA, say in early September, and say, this is what the town is considering, you know, is this something that you'll participate in or not?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'd be surprised if they gave you that decision. I'm sorry, Jeff. I'd be surprised if they gave you that decision. You're going to have to submit, I think you'll have to submit the whole preferred schematic report with your decision of what you want to do. And then they're going to review that and all the data and then tell you how they can participate in that. They can give you probably some indicators like that seems like it could work, but they're not going to like give you anything.
It just seems like it, and I'm not saying you're not wrong. I have seen that with them. Like they tend to be, you know, not very decisive until you do the big submissions. But it would seem to me, given that this is a drastic change from what was submitted for PDP, that, you know, it would make more sense for the town. And I think the MSBA should be able to say, hey, like, this is not within the realm, or, you know, yes, we'll consider it. I don't know. It just, to go through all of this effort through the end of October and then you wait on a board vote in December, you know, for them to say this isn't something we'd participate in would seem to be not in lining with their interest of trying to keep towns from wasting money.
Yeah, Mike, that was actually the reason for my question about how receptive they will be. Are they gonna at some point look at us and say, you know, Millis is too much work for us to even deal with? We have a project over here that we can, you know, smooth sailing, whatever.
That's unlikely. They're gonna work with you as long as they can, and if they can, until such a point where, you know, your ability to get the project passed either, you know, succeeds or it doesn't. That's my take on it, Jeff. I don't know if you have a different one.
No, that's true. I mean, there are other towns that have extended the feasibility stage that have gone back and reconsidered even a preferred alternative because the tide waters were going against that building committee, and so that building committee froze, went back to the drawing board and picked an alternate option from the one they originally selected. So as long as there's a two-way conversation with the MSBA and the building committee, and that you guys are making ultimate forward progress by understanding the road ahead, you know, they're going to be willing to work with you. I intend to have all the conversations that Mike is alluding to. I just think until we put a written submission in front of them, it's going to be a wishy-washy answer as to what level of participation they'll do. I think they'll say to us that it's something they can work with, but I'll have no idea if that's a $7 or $8 million swing one way or the other until we kind of draw it up and then put it in front of them. And so I think we need to get those early indicators, as Mike's alluding to. It's important, but I think we really need to, you know, understand what the options are before what I will look for them for guidance is to how do we even evaluate those metrics? You know, when it's an ad reno or a new construction, it's a square foot calculation. When they do their smaller repairs, such as like a roof window boiler, it's by component, and you're kind of in the middle. Like you're not touching all the square footage, you're doing more components in option, you know, 1 and 2, but by the time you get to 3, you're back to a kind of smaller version of the ad reno. So I don't know where they're going to land on that, and that's the two-way dialogue I need to have with them, you know, this summer and into the fall.
So here's a radical thought. Is any way to ask them to up their participation so we can actually do the right thing?
So they did that last year.
Because every town would do the same.
Well, that's right.
Participation to everybody last year, retroactively even, which was astonishing as a bailout for COVID, which helped a lot of towns get several $1 million extra. And they were in a very generous mood in 2024 or 2023 into 2024. What I will say to you is that when you get reimbursed on the components, the ratio plays much more favorable to the district, because when you're doing a new construction or a large scale ad reno, you cap out on all these different caps. And when you're doing a smaller project, you're getting the full value of the reimbursement. You're not getting the diminished value because of all the caps. And so I think there are benefits here that could help with the ratio of what the MSBA pays to what the town pays with these smaller renovation options compared to the larger ad reno options.
All right. So what was that? So we walked through the timeline. What was the next item on the agenda?
Agenda was school committee discussion, path forward, approval of invoices and minutes, and adjourn.
All right. Did Jeff, did you or Mike have anything else that you wanted to share with us, or were there any other questions from the group before we work on the next items?
When should we meet next?
That's a good question.
I think, Mike, do we have a deadline at one point? We were talking like late July at one point. Because Chris,
we don't have anything committed to at this point, no.
Chris,
Well, let's set a date.
Chris, do you have a deadline as to when you think your next available work product would be available to discuss the elements of the 10-year, or no? Is that in the month of July at this point or not at this point?
Not yet. We just started reaching out this week. Charlie and I did, to the consultants to start the 10-year process. But I think that according to our draft schedule, that's about, I think we need 3-4 weeks, and there's a big holiday coming up next week that most everybody's going to be either working light or gone. So I mean, I would say late July could work as a check-in. I don't, it's really up to the committee. I think I could also see an argument for just meeting back up in late August, and by that time we will have a very detailed description of like the existing conditions analysis, the 10-year plan, and then sort of like a big skeleton of how that could overlay with schedule, and then also the 0 to 3 options that we have been talking about. So I think we can be flexible. I am away the week of the 22nd through the 26th. But
I think,
other
Chris,
than that, I can be.
Chris, I think personally, I think giving your team some time to really develop the existing conditions analysis capital year, like, I would be in favor of just meeting back in August. Give the TAPE team really a good chunk of time to really develop that in conjunction with us and with the occasional working group meetings. Because then I think we'd have something really substantive to discuss come August.
Yeah,
that sounds good. What
that
about
works to me.
what about August? I gotta check the planning board thing. I don't know if we set the date. August 13th or the 20th. Does that work for anybody?
Yep, fine for me.
13th does, 20th doesn't for me, but 13th.
Let's do 13th.
All right, do we want, I agree the 13th is the next substantive meeting. Do we want to pencil in a date in July to the end or towards the end of July, just to talk about if there are any updates or feedback from the MSBA that we could choose to cancel? Or you could hold a meeting for, miscellaneous admin or invoices or things like that.
Sure, we could throw one in.
All right, so when do you want to stick with Tuesdays or Wednesdays or?
I have planning board on the 16th, so as long as it's not the 16th.
Yeah, I'm out that week, so if it's the fall, I'm back on Monday.
23rd?
22nd, so I could do the 23rd or 24th or 25th in those days.
You mind switching to the Wednesdays, or we were on Wednesday schedule? I know this is a Tuesday, but we were on
no, that's fine. Hold on.
Yeah, because I think
So-
there's a school committee meeting on the 23rd of July.
Yeah, so if we could do the 24th of July and the 14th of August.
14th would be tough. It's a national holiday. It's my birthday.
I was waiting for the punchline.
I'm gonna be 21.
Bring chicken.
National holiday indeed.
Okay, we can keep the 13th. I'll find a way to make that work.
Ooh. Can we go a week after that or not?
It doesn't work for Denise, but
Oh.
What about the 21st? Does the 21st work for you, Denise?
No, I'm gone that whole
The whole week? Okay.
Yeah.
28th.
I'm not here.
I think you want to get some updates from TAPE to move it along. I don't want to go
Yeah.
2 months without meeting.
Why don't we hold the 13th?
Yeah, I can cover it, Mike, if you can.
Yeah, I have another meeting scheduled, I think, for that day, but it's probably a 6 o'clock meeting, so I should be done by 7:30. By the way, considering the confusion tonight, are we going to switch back to the 7:30? Are we keeping 7 o'clock moving forward for these?
Well, I'm off because I'm on family
Yeah.
medical leave. So that's why I can do 7.
Okay.
When I go back to work, back to my 55 hours a week, I'll have to go back to 7:30. So
Sounds good. So we'll say 7:24 and 8:13 at 7 p.m.
And 7:24, is that back at 4 o'clock? Or is that the working group at 4 o'clock?
No, that's
No, we're saying with this group,
Oh, okay. Okay,
just give
so
the full
7:20,
committee update.
7:24 at 7 and 8:13 at 7. Okay.
7:24 will be just a quick update meeting with
Okay.
maybe invoices and minutes
Perfect.
and then Tape's team will have a bunch of updates for the 13th.
Sounds good.
Can I interrupt for just one moment? I just want to make a motion
Yep.
to adjourn the select board meeting because it looks like you're getting into stuff like paying bills and things like that.
Yep, sounds good.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the select board.
Second,
I didn't vote.
okay, we vote to adjourn. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Thank you,
night.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bert.
Bob, we should touch base maybe later this week on the PDP comments. We are going to need to formulate a response to those. So I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at them. There's a couple of things in there that have to do with the ed plan
Right.
that I need your input on, or someone from the district.
Yeah, is there a day that works? We have a school committee meeting on Thursday night. But otherwise, during the day, I'm fine.
Okay. I'm pretty flexible on Thursday and Friday with, a few spotty times. So if you have a preferred time, just let me know. I
Can you
can't do Thursday at 10 and 1, and I can't do Friday from 10 to noon. Other than that, I'm flexible.
Do you want to do 11 on Thursday?
Sure. I'll send you an invite.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
All right, and then Kim, if we could jump on to the bills, because I'm getting into the point where I'm gonna have to jump off the meeting pretty soon because I'll have to go move.
Yep, we have Vertex first, in the amount of $14,425 for the month of May, OPM professional services.
Okay, now Jeff, was this when we switched off of the?
Yeah, so you can see we've changed from a lump sum billing to reporting actual hours incurred,
Okay.
top half of the invoice. We'd only switched to T&M at the end of the month, which is why this is that.
No, that's fine.
Our normal burn rate would have been about 19,000 that we cut back.
Okay, perfect. All right, I make a motion that we approve the invoice for Vertex for the amount of $14,425 for professional services, May 1st through the month of May.
Second,
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then we have TAPE, also for the month of May in the amount of $100,146.35.
Okie dokie. All right.
So with TAPE's, just context for TAPE, so they had done most of the work in the PSR stage. That's why they're billing out at 90% complete of the feasibility study. So, at some point when you guys decide ultimately, what the project is, we're gonna have to, decide how many resubmissions we'll do with the MSBA, and there will need to be some level of an adjustment depending on what the project is. But that's the amount of money that they incurred to date when we told them to freeze and switch to T&M.
All right, well, that makes sense. All right, I make a motion that we approve the amount of $100,146.35 for TAPE Architects for professional services, for the month of May.
Second,
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that's it for invoices. And we have minutes from May 15th.
All right, well, I was not at that meeting, so I will leave that up to Diane. Do you want to make a motion?
yep, I make a motion to accept the minutes of May 15th.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
and I abstain. All right, I think that was the last item on our agenda.
Yes.
All right, well, that's good. I made it through the meeting. That's pretty exciting.
Good job,
Good for
Rich.
you.
I got to move.
Milestone.
So, all right, well, good to see everybody, and have a
see
good
you.
night. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
now.
Right.